Hey everyone, David Cristello here, founder and CEO of Jetpack Workflow and host of today's session all around the wonderful world of workflow. Got a bunch of people joining us today. Really excited to talk about the wonderful world of workflow and process. As we get into it, I got a little deck here with some pre-populated questions. So I'll go ahead and share my screen here in a second as we go through some of the questions that were asked in advance. But before we do, let's just do a quick audio video check. The main thing is the audio. My crutch is I have some slides with the questions that were submitted in advance, but go ahead and let me know that you can hear me, you can see me, you might even see this deck we have in the queue. So go ahead and type into your questions or your chat, whatever latest Zoom vocabulary is hanging out in your footer. Go ahead and type that in right now. And we will get going here in just a minute. So let me know where you're calling in from. Is it a hot and humid Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania? Is it dry? Is it cold? Is it actually cold? Where you're at? Let me know. Maybe it's raining. I don't know. Which was quite the storm here yesterday. So let me know where you're calling in from. Wendy, hello, hello. We're just doing an audio and video check with the folks that are joining. Wendy, remind me, where are you calling in from today?
I am in Ponte Vedra Beach, Florida, which is the northeastern corner of Florida. We're barely even Florida.
Okay, okay. But you're still there. You still get the income tax
We
tax.
do, we do, we do, we do.
Just barely enough, but you have one of the most important things, I suppose. All right, Lori,
Oh,
thanks
yeah.
for calling in. Amy from Arizona, David from Atlanta. Yep, sorry, I meant Q&A. You all are so tech savvy. Everyone's saying chat is disabled, chat is disabled. Yes, go ahead, just type in a question and let me know. That will be the way to do it. Got Bill from Pennsylvania. I can hear you. We have Rachel from Houston, New York. Another from New York. Peaches, New York. Extremely humid. I hear you. It is humid in Pennsylvania. I think it's what I don't even feel like I'm allowed to complain because Wendy's in Florida in July.
Right,
So I mean, like, what do we have? This little
right.
level of humidity up here relative to you. All right. Well, fantastic. We are ready to go. We're 3 minutes past the hour. We got a bunch of questions to go through, but I want to remind folks. So we've had questions submitted in advance, which is great,
Yep.
But part of the power of showing up live is you get to ask questions as they bubble up. So as you're jotting down with your notebook, and I'm a techie, but I still have my notebook over here, and you can jot down
Me
your
too.
questions and jot down your notes. Ask them in the questions because Wendy is here. Now, who is this person? I've been talking to her a little bit. Okay, so let's just do a quick intro. I'll quickly introduce myself. Wendy, I'll let you introduce yourself for
Sure.
20, 30 seconds. And then I'm going to show the slides that have the question, and then I'm going to stop so you and I could just have a conversation. This is not a slide deck. This is an exploration through the wonderful world of workflow. And we're going to try to take it out of the academic, which sometimes CPE feels like, and into the hyper practical, which you live through your firm all the way through exit. So having said that, I'll let you go first, Wendy. Wendy, can you briefly introduce yourself, who you are, and what you're up to?
Sure. Thank you, David. My name is Wendy Barlin. I'm a CPA and I've been in this industry for 25 years. I bought a firm in 2011 and grew it for 10 years and then sold in 2021. And it was right during COVID. And I sold because my firm was way ahead of its time compared to many of my colleagues. We had no receivables. We were all front pay on everything we did. We were in the sky. I got rid of my office back in 2016. We had a team in India, a team in the Philippines. We were very progressive with technology. So I reached a point where I personally got stuck. And so that's why I sold. Now I work with other firms, helping them get ready for sale. And Jetpack was always part of my tech stack. So I work a lot with clients who come to me and say, what software should I buy? And I do a lot of consulting in terms of workflow and processes.
All right. I know we're going to get a little bit into tech, so I think people are going to be a little surprised by your answer here as we get into it. For folks not familiar with me, I'm David Cristello, founder and CEO of Jetpack Workflow, also host of Growing Your Firm podcast. We had Wendy on to talk about her journey. She mentioned some things here today, like buying the firm, selling the firm. We get into on the Growing Your Firm podcast. We're going to go deep in workflow today, but make sure that you are subscribed to our newsletter at jetpackworkflow.com/blog if you want to see when her interview drops. So, having said that, I'm excited to dig in. Remember, everybody listening, follow along, type questions in. If Wendy already said something, you're like, "Ooh, workflow, and how does that interface with outsourcing and talent that I'm not next to?" Start loading those in, and I'll grab those. I have the slides here. I have no remorse over cutting slides for the live questions, right? I want to go live questions over the slides. So having said that, here's the first one I want to start with. I'll read through it. Wendy, I'll let you kind of respond. I'm going to stop the
Yeah.
share and it's just be me and you back and forth. But this question we come up with all the time. We talk with champions, we talk with firm partners, firm leaders, technologists, operations directors, and they say, "Oh, we have to get organized. We have to get clarity over our team. I'm really motivated, but sometimes my team's not really motivated, especially if we tried tools in the past and it didn't go well." So I'm curious what you've learned or what you help your clients implement in terms of getting buy-in for new tools, new tech like Jetpack or anything else that might be helping your workflow and process.
Yeah, that's always the biggest challenge, right? A change management all the way through the team from the highest level to the lowest level. And I'll just tell you, it's never going to be 100%. I don't want to rain on anyone's parade, but you're never going to get 100% buy-in. There's always going to be that one person who just doesn't want to do it. So really, some of the strategies that you're going to employ are going to be change management type strategies. So goals, competitions, anything that's positive that gets people to embrace the change, embrace the new software and learn together. Teaching moments, prizes on Fridays, whatever you can do to make this a positive experience. And just know that there's always going to be one in every group. And ultimately, what you want to do is have a strategy to deal with that one person who just won't get with the program. They need a mentor. They need someone in the firm who's going to help them along, because what we cannot have is that one person whispering in everybody else's ear about how this is a terrible change, terrible, because that kind of tends to spread. So identifying who the person is that's not on board and helping manage them and help them along at a slower pace or a different pace than works for everybody else. But I love positive reinforcement and incentives.
Okay, so we'll go down two different paths. Positive reinforcement incentives. So what else, for the people that are in, how do you keep the momentum? But like let's go back to that we'll call a challenging person. So you're
Yep,
like, I know this person, they've struggled in the
yep.
past, they're going to struggle again. You mentioned a mentor or a different ramp up. I guess what practically does that look like that's different maybe from other parts of the team?
Yeah. So I just had this last week with the client where there was one person who just is not participating. And so what we did was we allocated them someone who is going to meet with them every single day. And I know that sounds like a huge resource, but it's a 15-minute check-in. So 15-minute check-in in the morning, 15-minute check-in in the day. Are you using the system? Are you following this? What are your challenges? What's working? What's not working? Just to hear them, because sometimes the person that's struggling with change, struggling to embrace a new system, just needs to be heard. So I gave them a task for the first week to meet with this person once or twice a day and just check in, acknowledge the challenges, acknowledge the fears, the concerns, and then push them along a little bit. And let's do that for a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks. Ultimately, if someone doesn't make the change, then we need to have a conversation. Is this the right place for you to work? But I'm hopeful that we don't end up there.
Yeah. And you're saying this is typically about the first week where there's the most
Yeah,
cognitive worry, stress, you're doing that
right.
daily check-in.
Yep, exactly. And I would do it even for a couple of weeks. If this is an employee that you really want to keep, if this is a team member who's valuable to your team and you don't just want to say, hey, you're not playing the game with us. Thanks for coming. Bye-bye. Let's find somewhere else where you'd be happier. Then I would commit the 15-minute resource every day or twice a day to check in with them and see if perhaps you can help them along. Because I have seen people turn it around. They just need a little hand-holding, a little additional care, whereas others are like, great, yeah, I see how this will benefit me. I'm in for the prize on Fridays. Bring it on. We have different personalities in every firm, and sometimes we need to allow people to be who they are.
Great. And on the flip side, you mentioned the positive reinforcements. So for the folks that get it and like it, do you kind of just let them run and build momentum, or do you find different frameworks or rewards or whatever it may be for their first 30 days that's maybe similar
Yeah.
but different than the one who is maybe struggling a little bit?
Right. Well, hopefully the person who's struggling sees everyone else having fun and they're like, oh, I want to participate in that.
Yeah.
But it becomes part of the weekly team meetings where we do that 5-minute check-in. How's the new system going? Does anyone have a tip or a trick to share? What are the challenges you've had? Share those, and how are you overcoming them with the group? So it becomes a group effort to implement a new system, manage a new system, and deal with everybody's ups and downs, because we all have days where we're like, oh, the system makes me crazy. But I like to have challenges, free giveaways for participation. When I implemented a new timesheeting system into a firm I was dealing with earlier in the year, we did surprise giveaways when I would go in and see that someone had completed their timesheet and submitted it and followed the instructions. I just walked into the team meeting, it was on Zoom, but came into the team meeting and said, 100%, David was the only person who followed the instructions, completed the team meeting. Here's a $50 Starbucks gift card. Thank you for your participation. And all of a sudden, everybody else is like, well, I think maybe next week I'm going to participate. So I didn't offer that every week. It was a surprise. And maybe
Yeah.
the next week I didn't offer it, because the expectation is not that you do it and get a prize. The expectation is your responsibility to complete your timesheets. But when I do see one person or two people stepping up to lead the way, I reward them. And that sometimes brings the others along. So really, it's about knowing your team. What kind of strategies can you implement? Some firms have firm bucks, that they hand out that have values. And sometimes it's just public acknowledgement. Thank you, David, for leading the charge and dealing with whatever came up this week. So know your team and know what works. But in my opinion, positive reinforcement has always had better results than negative. So the public shaming, public belittling, punishments have not seemed to help us move the team forward, in my
Yeah.
experience.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. I do really love this weekly team meeting. Bring a tip or a tactic you've learned about the new tool or feedback. I mean, I think for some of the
Right.
people that are championing new pieces of technology in the firm, use the vendor strategically. And so, for example, if there are issues, feedback, questions, dream list of things you'd want to see improve, if you're curating that on weekly, I would say for business like ours, maybe it's different if they're, much bigger firm than us, but like we cherish that. So if we're getting feedback on where to take the product, or they're saying they're struggling doing X, then our success team can look at this and say, oh, well, that's because you're doing it this way. It's probably a little bit better this way based on how we know your firm. So, I love this team meeting and these tips and tactics and feedback, also pass that along to the vendor. And if the firm gets stuck, use the vendor as the good person or bad person. I don't know. It's like,
Right.
oh yeah, I will definitely let them know. Right. And toss it over to the vendor and really hold them accountable too, to help you drive some of this change management.
Right, because we want to know at the end of the day, is it a training issue? Is it a software issue? Is it a people issue? What is the issue? People love to blame the technology, right? Well, it's Jetpack's fault, it's Jetpack. But sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's been our training, sometimes it's our processes, sometimes it's our people. So just by someone raising their hand in that meeting and saying, hey, I'm having a challenge, or it's not working for me, that allows us to then look and go, well, might not be working for everybody else, but the others haven't had the courage to raise their hands. So it really allows us to look. And the idea, by the way, is not to solve it in that meeting, right? We don't want like an 8-hour team meeting. The idea is to note the issue, and then whoever's responsible for implementation to then research that and resolve the issue outside of the meeting.
Brilliant. I love that. All right, I'll do one more question. As a reminder, drop your questions in the Q&A in the Zoom bar, wherever that is on your screen. If I don't see questions, don't worry. I have a bunch that were submitted in advance. All right, but let's go to the next one. We see some version of this come up a lot. Sometimes it's how do we build from scratch, right? It's in my head, it's in a spreadsheet, it's three partners, brain plus spreadsheet plus calendar. They use a tool, but nobody else uses the tool, and it's kind of in a bunch of different silos. Or maybe it's like, look, we're growing and we're trying to figure out how to build this thing as we're growing so quickly. But Wendy, I'll let you take this wherever you ever want to go with it. But how do you start? What are some best practices for building your workflows? I would say in a startup firm or in a high growth firm, I think they go through similar challenges.
Right. I mean, after I shut down my office, I came in one day and I just had enough. And I shut it down. I was like, everybody, you're fired. Get your stuff and go home. I'm done. This office is closed. And I'm a quick decision maker. So it was one of those
Have
days.
you always been a quick decision maker? I
Uh-huh.
think some people listening will be like, "Wow,
Yeah.
how can?" Yeah,
So
okay,
I'm
you've
not
always been a
saying I
quick.
recommend to do what I did. I'm not saying to recommend to do what I did. I'm a very quick decision maker. Show me a menu and I pick something to eat just like that. But I don't recommend it. My point was that the next day I hired a consultant, got myself on a plane and went to Arizona for 2 days where we whiteboarded processes for my dream firm based on my experience of what I knew. Some things worked, some things didn't work. I knew I wanted to go remote where the processes are going to be a little different. And so we spent 2 full days whiteboarding how from the very first time of the phone rings, what happens when a piece of paper arrives, what's the end result, all the way through, client paying their bill and sending a 3-point questionnaire on how do you like our service. That entire process we whiteboarded in 2 days. And I really recommend having an outside person do it, because when you try and do it yourself, you are too close to the system and you're going to forget little pieces. You're going to go, oh yeah, the paper comes in and then it goes over to David and he works on it. But a third person will say, how does it get to David? And how long does that take? So really, it doesn't have to be an expensive consultant. You could even hire a virtual assistant. You could hire a teenager, anyone who does not work side by side with you every day, that can walk you through whiteboarding, penciling, whatever works for you, but get that system down so that you can see it, annotate it before you build any software around it.
And yeah, so that's interesting. What I like about that is it's 2 days and it's done. I do think if you try to, half do it, you try to squeeze it in 30 minutes, an
Yeah,
hour, 90 minutes here, I'll take a quarter
yeah.
versus the night, the 2 days of fully dedicated time. Now, how, somebody asked, Rachel had this question, which is how to map out existing workflow processes in a firm, which we covered. But then she mentioned that offers a variety of services. So how many services were you mapping out in those 2 days?
Yeah, it gets complicated, right? So you kind of have to have offshoots. If you think about it almost as like a diagram, like a Venn diagram that you have the central operations, and then you have each service line is going to have its own workflow process. Sales has workflow process, marketing has workflow process, billing has workflow process, operations. So each division, I mean, think of it kind of like GM, right? Where you have operations here, you have the warehouse, you have manufacturing. So I would start at the very beginning with sales and marketing and flow through your entire process. And then, yes, each service line needs its own workflow. Ultimately, you may combine them. When you choose your software and you start building out the technology, you may be able to combine a lot of those pieces. But for me, from a thought process point of view and a planning point of view, I wanted to look at how does the accounting department work? How does the CFO department work? How does the tax department work? Because then you can find the similarities and differences. But to try and do it all as one service, I found a little overwhelming. So I definitely split mine out into my different service lines.
And for context, when you did this, how big was the firm? How many different services were you offering that you ended up mapping out over 2 days?
Yes. So we were offering after the fact bookkeeping, not bill pay, just after the fact bookkeeping, monthly reconciliations, monthly CFO services, income tax planning, and then income tax prep. So it was pretty much a full suite of services.
Yeah.
And I had one person here in the US who was my operations person. I had someone in California who was my reviewer. Then I had a team in India and a team in the Philippines.
Okay. Okay. I'm waiting for these workflow questions about the team in the Philippines and India. I might just have to ask them because I'm curious because, I'm in all kinds of conferences this year and everybody's trying to figure out the talent crisis. And so there's all
Yeah.
these questions around pipeline and recruiting, but then it's like, well, in the interim or maybe long term, we want to figure out nearshore, offshore talent. Couple more questions. Um, Amy's asking the tough one. She goes, what if the employee that has not bought is in a leadership role, is higher up, right? You're the technology champion and you might be reporting directly up to this person or adjacent, that might be managing
Yeah.
a different team.
Yeah. I think you have a hard choice to make. Is this person coachable? Are they coachable and do you want to commit the time? Because the question is why? Why aren't you with us? What's going on? So sometimes take them to lunch, take them to dinner, take them for a walk, and what is going on? And maybe an outside coach to help them work through whatever the issue is. But if there's an underlying concern, maybe they're not the right person for the role, unfortunately. And just circling back around to your comment, I don't think we have a hiring crisis. I think, in my opinion, and I've been helping firms hire for the last 2 years, I don't believe the people aren't out there. I believe we have the wrong people hiring. Because every single time I work with a firm and I look at their hiring processes, who they're hiring, why, and how, I'm not surprised they can't find the right people for the right roles. They're asking the wrong questions. Anyway, that's another whole topic for another day, but I am not convinced there is a hiring crisis. I think this is something that people are saying in the marketplace to make themselves feel better that they're keeping the wrong people in the wrong places on the bus because there's a hiring crisis. I
So
have not had that experience.
we will dig in if the audience wants us to dig in.
Okay.
Maybe they're like, yeah, we agree with Wendy. Yeah, maybe there's more. So type in if you want us to dig into that broken hiring process. But just going back to your point, what if you can't let that person go? I think, I'm reading the intention of Amy's point. It was just maybe it's somebody that you can't let go because it's somebody in a higher level
Yeah.
leadership role. I think the managing up mentality of maybe taking them to lunch and something, I think there's something to the managing up
Coaching. Yeah, coaching.
perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Absolutely. I would, what's the underlying reason? Because it's not, come on, nobody wants to make their lives or your life difficult. I can't believe that
Yeah.
someone gets up in the morning, brushes their teeth, and says, I'm going to go to work and make Wendy's life difficult. I can't believe that. There's something else going on. Are they afraid? Are they uncomfortable that their leadership role is not solid? Like, what is it? It's something else. And that's where you have to get to find out what that something else is and help them. And truthfully, if you have someone on your team that's not truly on your team because they don't see the vision and the moving forward of the firm, then I don't really care if they're the janitor or my director of tax, but they're going to be a long-term exit. So if I've tried coaching and I've tried to ask them and they're still being a no, and they're still derailing the values and the vision and the plan for the firm, then I'm going to start putting a plan in place to replace them. Nobody's not replaceable. I truly
Yeah,
believe.
but in the place where they are superior in the org chart, they're
Yeah,
taking them to lunch and understand like they're not trying to make like you
correct.
said, I think there's something maybe to unpack on a relationship level and I think investigating frameworks on how to manage up,
Right.
maybe they're adjacent to you, maybe they're this is who you report
Yes.
to, but
Yeah. A feedback system is critical, and sometimes those feedback systems don't work too.
yeah. Anne mentioned, how do you limit scope creep by employee? Sometimes, and I'm
Oh,
putting words here, right? But it's like so you're hiring
yeah.
these people, they want to help the client, they want to
Yes.
get the job done. So they're exceeding budgets, they're not correcting processes, and it's creating over budget. So
Right.
as you get your process together, then how do you monitor scope creep or things that are going over budget?
Right. I think this is where project management and project planning are so critical in that there's so many ways to do it. But one of the ways is keeping your team involved in the project planning piece of it. You know, what did we promise the client? What are we doing? How long is it taking? And then offering people bonuses or some sort of value for showing you where there is scope creep. So if there's some benefit for them going, wait, this is outside of what we're supposed to do, because you're right, we all want to help. And oh my gosh, so many times I've gone above and beyond for a client, knowing it's completely out of scope. We all do that, I think. But I think it's important for us as leaders and to meet with the team and constantly looking at the project planning. What are you doing? What are you working on? How long is it taking? Are we meeting our goals? And then have those discussions, because I find that's where it comes up in communication. So the firms that don't have project communication between team members are the ones where that scope creep tends to get lost more because nobody knows about it. But if you're meeting with your team regularly, talking about the projects on their desk, you will much quicker be able to ascertain when that is happening and explain to them. Don't be mean about it. It's not like you're not supposed to do that. I think sometimes team members don't understand the dollars and profitability associated with scope creep, in that really this is about us as a firm being profitable. And it's not about you not helping or punishing the client by making them pay more. It's about the profitability of our team. So I find communication throughout projects helps keep everyone aware of the kind of work that's actually being performed.
Yeah, I'd love to. So this is one of the questions I was submitted in advance, which is best practices for communicating within the workflow. So by extension of that, are you talking about, what practically has been great from a communication standpoint? You mentioned the weekly meeting. Are there daily stand-ups? Are there ways that you're flagging or tagging things that are worrisome? Like what's kind of worked out best in terms of communication?
Yeah, so the team lead really is the person who should be leading that charge. And then I think that's where I let the teams decide. The daily 5 minute huddle standing meeting doesn't really work for me because I kind of like to play tennis a couple of mornings a week. And with everyone working remotely, I didn't want everyone to have to be online at a certain time of every single day. Once a week, I felt was enough commitment. And so I think when you have Slack channels, that where you use Slack or something, Teams, to be more of a conversation place and not a workplace. So I always guide my firms to say Slack and Teams are not to put work. They are to have conversations. Like I just spoke to Wendy and she's asking me to make an adjustment to a 2023 return, but it's done. What should I do? Or I just got off the phone with David and he's complaining again about our bills. That's the kind of conversation I want to see going on. And then when it's actually work specific, it should go through the workflow system. It should be in Jetpack, the comments. But I do like the weekly check-ins with your team on their work. So if I'm the team lead, I'm going to meet with my managers and two bookkeepers, or through however big your teams are. I'm going to meet with my huddle team once a week and say, what project are you working on? What's going on with that project? Are you stuck? Do you need help? And that's where those discussions of somebody's asking for something outside of scope will come up. So I actually have the teams or pods, whatever you call them in your firm, meet weekly on what's going on in their work, because again, there's something with that discussion that supersedes what people take the time to write down.
Yeah, yeah, fantastic, fantastic. Let's see what else is coming in. So the questions are starting to come in. All right, all right. Well, we got a couple people say, please tell us more about the hiring process. We've been struggling with that. Somebody says, please do interview Wendy about her hiring process. Okay, so the entire industry is saying talent crisis, pipeline crisis, which I mean, there is. People just aren't graduating with accounting degrees. But you're saying on the flip side, people are using that as an excuse to not have a good hiring process, essentially. So they're kind of shooting themselves in the foot. My words, of course, not yours. So Tell me more.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
What is broken? What is broken here in the hiring process? See, this is, by the way, this is the benefit of being live. We're gonna unpack it right now.
Yeah. So I think first you have to look at your firm and yourself and what's going on. So I was at a brick and mortar firm in Orlando a couple of months ago, and the place was a dump. I mean, it was a dump. It was terrible. The water cooler had mold around it. The kitchen was full of empty toilet roll boxes. And so when someone who runs a firm like that says to me, Wendy, we can't keep good people, come on, is there anyone on the call who's surprised? If you were an A player, you want to work in a place like that? I didn't want to, I went out to go buy water because I wasn't going to drink water there. The same thing with online. I'll be invited to someone's team meeting or Zoom call, and people just aren't nice. They're nice. They're not nice. The managers are not nice. The partners are not nice. And then they say, we can't hire. Nobody wants to work here. Okay. Is that a surprise? Because I'll tell you that my A firms, the people who are fantastic that I love working with, they have no problem hiring. They have fantastic retention. So the first place I would look is at yourself and at the firm you're running. Is this somewhere you enjoy working every day? Would you want your mother, your brother, your sister, your daughter to work here? So first look at the environment, because I see a lot of environments that are not great. And just saying this is the way it's always been is not okay. That is not okay. So it's the environment. I think it's this definition of what you're hiring for. Excuse me. So I get a lot of people say, man, we need a staff accountant. We need a senior accountant. We need a tax supervisor. What is that? What is that? What does that person do? And what are you expecting of them? So one of the first things I do is let's look at your org chart. Who's doing what? Who's reporting to whom? What are their roles and responsibilities? What are their tasks? What skill set do they really need to do the job? And then what kind of personality do they need? Because trying to put a square peg in a round hole is not going to work. So simply placing an ad for a staff accountant, getting 8 resumes, interviewing 8 people and going, well, I think that person's probably, yeah, they're good. Okay. And then being frustrated because they can't do the job, that doesn't work, right? We've got the wrong people because we don't even understand what we actually need at each place in our business. So look at
The
who you really
outputs,
need
the
to
outputs
hire.
are not defined, or the outputs of that role are not defined purely by job title.
Correct. So those job titles have become completely meaningless. Then the other thing is actually give them a test. And over the last couple of weeks, I have done nothing but be the bad guy. I'm sure they're firm owners right now who are like stabbing my face with needles on their walls because they email me and they're like, Wendy, we got a great tax supervisor. I'm so excited. I found him. His resume's great. He'll work for 100 grand. Love it. And then I give him a tax test and he fails. And they say, it's okay, your tax test was probably hard, or he won't really have to deal with those kind of issues. And his resume is great. We're going to hire him. Dollars to donuts, in 6 months, that person's gone. They can't do the test. So you can't just look at someone's resume and again, be using these innocuous titles. Oh, they were a staff accountant here and they were an advisor there and they were, you can't do that. Give them a test. Give them a test. If I put an 1120S in front of you that I have faked, and you can't find the 3 errors just by looking at it or 3 issues that you would take to your manager, okay. If you want to be an accounting supervisor, meaning that you review the work of the bookkeepers, help them with their issues, and manage the balance sheet, and I give you a debit and a credit test, and you can't pass it, I don't care how many years you've been working as a senior, you're not going to do it in my firm. So I find that the sense of desperation that has evolved in the industry because everyone's saying, I can't find anyone. Oh my God, me either. I have a resume. They look like they can do the job, so I'm going to hire them. And that's kind of become pervasive, and people are scared to say no. They're scared to fire quickly, and they're scared to give people tests to do. One of the other tests that I'll leave you with, and then I'll let people shoot me down if they want to, but one of the other tests that I do, I don't know if I told you this, David, I've never, in the 10 years I've been doing this test, had an issue. Give people a jigsaw puzzle. accounting
This is new.
and
We definitely did not talk about
we
the
didn't talk
jigsaw
about this.
puzzle on the
Okay.
podcast.
So
No.
people say to me, Wendy, are you good at math? No, I'm terrible at math. I can't add. People give me the bill in a restaurant and expect me to do the tip in my head. No, I can't do that. I'm terrible at that. But I'm very good at jigsaw puzzles. And most of the accountants and really good problem solvers that we work with are good at jigsaw puzzles. So what I have always done is ask people to complete a jigsaw puzzle on the screen if it's remote, or in person if they're coming into my office. You won't believe how many people come in and go, I'm not doing that. I don't do jigsaw puzzles. Then you're not hired. That was easy. Um, and what I'm looking for is
I think
not,
it's so hard. Well, I think sometimes there's so
yeah,
much fear. If you're desperate, if the pipeline's dry, you don't have good
yeah,
candidates, you're not getting good leads, you find a resume, you do have a lot of worry that you're just not going to be able to, keep this prospect interested in joining the firm if you're putting all these hurdles in front of them. I mean, I understand exactly what you're saying. It's logical. You want to run them through the test because firing is much more difficult and painful than maybe not hiring in the first place. But I'm just thinking, this is, I think, a lot of hesitancy around putting what people would see as friction to making the offer.
absolutely. And I get a lot of pushback. I got broad shoulders. I've been in this industry 25 years. You're not going to hurt my feelings. So yes, I had that discussion with the client last week. She's like, Wendy, come on, I'm dying here. I'm reviewing financial statements myself. I'm working 60 hours a week. I need someone to help me. And you're telling me this guy can't do the job. And I said to her, hire him, hire him. But I don't want to hear the complaint in 3 months when he can't do the job. Because I'm telling you, he failed my test and I know he can't do the job. So I get it. I know you're desperate and I know you're doing the work that you wish you had someone else to do. But that's what's happening right now. People are desperate. And so they're taking someone that's not the right person for you. This person might be the right person for someone else, but they can't get them because you just hired them into the wrong position for the wrong role, whereas they would be much better off at another firm doing something else. So there's this mismatch and people in the wrong roles. And so, yes, I get a lot of pushback. And there were two candidates. She ended up hiring one and not the other. So we'll see. I mean, I can only give you my advice based on my experience, but I get it. You're right. People are desperate. They're doing the work themselves. It's hard to say no to
Yeah.
someone who smells like they could be the right candidate.
Yep, yep. Well, keep asking questions in the Q&A. I'm going to go into the next one here. So here's one that came up. How do you spot gaps? Let's say you went through the process, you feel good, you have the end all be all, you love your workflow process, it's documented in a tool. It's great, great, great. But then how do you kind of audit if the process is working or not, or if it's as efficient as it should be or could be?
Yeah, so that's almost something I like to do once a year. A lot of firms plan retreats, and so that might be something you put in your calendar once a year to analyze or kind of go over your systems again with a fine tooth comb away from the office. But I actually think those things come up regularly. When you're onboarding new employees, if they're smart, they'll ask. They'll say, this doesn't make sense. How does the system work? Or what
So
about this piece of paper?
use the employee onboarding
Yeah, as a
as a
test.
way to update your processes. I mean, I think that's
Mhm.
really important.
Yep. And then just, the team meetings as your team are working through projects and they're looking at the workflow, people are going to say, well, I mean, I actually just said that to someone today. I got a request for something and I said, that wasn't on my dashboard. I'm like, well, I don't know why it's not on your dashboard. I'm like, well, we got to figure out why it's not on my dashboard, because if the workflow process is working, that task should have been on my dashboard and it wasn't. So, it just takes a village, I guess. It takes everyone in the organization to really stay on top of keeping your workflow updated and accurate.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Somebody had a clarifying question. Greg said, "Can you explain this jigsaw puzzle? Like,
Uh, so,
what are you hoping to get out of it? You
yeah,
mentioned that you'll have a jigsaw puzzle. They'll do it live or in person. Is it just
yeah.
cognitive
So
acuity? What you had a question? Tell us.
that's great. It's
How do
not
you
about,
use it to evaluate the candidate? Was the specific
well,
question?
I'm using it to evaluate how they think and if they are a problem solver, because generally people who do jigsaw puzzles are problem solvers, right? And we want to hire problem solvers because I can't teach that. I can teach debits and credits. I can teach workflow. I can't teach you to be a problem solver. So we're looking for that. And the way we're looking is we're not looking at how quickly they solve the puzzle, because I've seen people do the outside first. I've seen people split the colors first and actually come out at the same time. So it's not about how quickly they do it. I'm looking to see how they do it. So do they do the corners and the outside first? Do they split the colors? Some people sit and just look and look and look, and then they go and they do it. Other people move a few pieces and then they sit and they look. And some people are slow as molasses. And I'm like, oh, you are going to kill my budgets. There is no way I can work with you. So it's about, again, looking at what do you need on your team right now? And what kind of skill set does that role need? And then when you look at how someone does a jigsaw puzzle, the strategy of how they go about it and physically how they do it, how would that match? So when I was looking for my own virtual assistant, someone who's going to be a mini me, think like me, know what I needed, be one step ahead of me, she needed to do the puzzle the same way I would. And so that's what I was looking for. When we're looking for something different, then we're looking for maybe someone slower, maybe someone who does the colors first. So again, it's about matching the role, the responsibility with what you see them doing. But that's kind of been a fun, easy one. And I'll just tell you, someone doesn't want to do a jigsaw puzzle. That means they're not a problem solver. They're not logical. They're not up for a challenge. It's not a personality trait I want in my firm. You may, no judgment, right? We're all different. We're all building a different culture and different vision, but I want problem solvers.
So we got this question that came in from Amy a bit earlier. It I think is a little bit to the team buy-in question, but I'm curious if you would do
Okay.
anything different. She mentioned, can you address the difficulties when there is an age gap? Sometimes having older team members, it's difficult to get them to embrace technology and new programs. So would you follow the same process we outlined at the beginning of the session, or are there tweaks or adjustments you would think about for that
Yeah.
specific question?
I think we have to treat everybody the same, but I also believe that we need to play to someone's strengths. So if they really are struggling with the technology and willing to learn, then invest the time in teaching them. If they're not willing to learn, but they have other strengths, can we play to those? And then give the people you want to keep as much coaching and mentorship as is possible. Because if they're A players and you want to keep them, then I would deploy every strategy I probably could to help them succeed. But everyone's got to use the workflow. I can't have firms where these two people, they don't like computers or they don't get the work. No, that's not going to help our systems, right? Because I want to be able to run a report and see where all my work is. And so I can't have people not using the system. Everyone has to use the system, but we can certainly support those people who need it a little more to use the system correctly.
Yeah, and I just pulled up the slide because it's like if you're not using, look, obviously I'm a fan of Jetpack. Hey, we're Jetpack, okay? Disclosure, full disclosure. But it's like if you're not using the tool, then it didn't happen, right? So whether it's Jetpack or your magical spreadsheet, if it's like wherever you've agreed it's documented, if it doesn't live there, it doesn't happen, right?
Right.
There's no secrets, there are your silos, in the firm, as it pertains to that. But there's a good question up here, which is sometimes people get analysis paralysis a little bit as they're building out their process as their workflow, which is like how detailed should it be? And I mean, I can tell you, we've seen very high level and extremely detailed. I'm curious what you see on your end and what you would consider best practice.
I would rather go more detailed and then delete what you don't need later than keep it high level, start building out your software and realize you're missing pieces. So I would rather go as deep as possible and then delete along the way. And I also recommend using a third party to keep you on task, and to keep pushing you to go deeper. And then what? And then what? And then what? And so it doesn't have to be me or an accountant. It could be a virtual assistant. It could be a college student. I think we all need someone outside of the organization to keep us digging into, and then what and why, and then what and why. Yeah.
I love that.
Deep
I
as you
love
can
that.
go.
All right, I think we have time. One or two more questions. I like this one a lot because I could just feel some angst, I feel like, when I was reading this question. And I don't know, maybe the answer is what you did in that office. You're like, we're just shutting it down. I don't know. But so here's the question. How do I motivate my staff to not go totally rogue regarding the process of their workflow through each tax season? So you have a mountain of work. Obviously, tax season's very busy for folks. It can also happen when you're going through extreme client growth. This is the way I'd read this. So
Yeah.
it's like growth is happening, there's a ton of work, and people just say, maybe innocently, everybody starts to not quote totally follow it, not to use the tool as much, not to document things. So how do you course correct when it's inevitable with people? Of course, there's going to be times where they get missed, everybody's aligned in the beginning and then things branch out. So what have you found
Yeah.
is a good way to, maybe avoid even the place of people going rogue, totally rogue in the first place?
Yeah, plus that's kind of catchy, right? So one person does, and then everyone's like, well, don't worry about that. Just do it this way. It
Yeah.
becomes an epidemic. Um, please don't not do your weekly team meetings during tax season. I beg of you. Please continue doing those weekly meetings because that's where that is going to become evident. So whoever at the end of every week is in charge of tax productivity and tax operations and is looking at the reports will be able to very quickly see if something's gone awry because I watch my reports every Friday, right? How the last 5 days or 6 or 7 days of
What are
work.
these reports telling you? What are some of the metrics you're seeing?
Um,
That's
how are the tax returns moving through the system? Is everybody's time in? Client communications, are they there? So I'm running every single report that I can possibly think of for operations. And as soon as I see someone's time isn't in, or they didn't annotate in the task firm protocol or whatever it is, I'm going to mention that at the team meeting. Now, I'm not going to say David did it. I'm just going to say in this week's reports, I noticed that we had a couple of people not doing the system or one person not doing the system. May I please remind you that this is part of your role and responsibility to do that. And then the next week, if it happens again, I would call them in and say, what's the deal? I get it that you're busy. How can I help you? How can we make this better? But the rules are the rules. We can't have people
yeah.
going rogue. That's when things get missed. That's when mistakes happen. And then guess who has egg on their face when you get a tax notice?
The bookends seem really important where you have the start of the week, Monday meeting,
Yeah.
but that Friday review, how much time are you spending on that Friday review to get your bearings together for that Monday meeting?
Probably an hour to 2 hours every Friday for operations. If you don't have an operations person in your operations, right? When I was running my firm, I did not have an operations person. I had a virtual assistant. And so she would do a lot of the legwork on those reports for me. So on a Thursday night, because she was in the Philippines. So on a Thursday night when the US shut down, she would go in and run a bunch of reports so that when I came in on Friday morning, the reports were waiting for me. But then I was the one actually analyzing the reports, looking for my outliers, looking for trouble areas. And then if I could address them on Friday, I did, but I used them for my team meeting on Monday morning. And so if you have an operations person, they can highlight them for you and let you know about 2 or 3 things. But I used to spend a good hour to 2 hours every Friday morning on my report. I mean, that's the backbone of our business,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely, absolutely. Wendy, this has been a real treat. We're gonna, of course, take the recording, we'll share it. We're gonna do a bunch of clips with it as well. But for people attending live, where should they go to connect with you, learn more? I know you work with a lot of firms, so what's the best way for them to connect with you?
Oh, sounds good. Thank you. I can't believe we're at time already. We can just keep doing this all day, right? Um, wendybarlin.com is my website. You can contact me directly. I'm also on LinkedIn all the time. So if you want to ping me on LinkedIn, I will get back to you. I kind of do go through all that spam and just delete the junk. But please reach out, whether you agree or disagree with me. I love having these conversations. Helping firm owners is my passion.
Okay, great. And I'm going to launch a little poll here. So if you want to hear from Wendy, drop a note. Then we'll do some follow up. We'll share it with Wendy. If you want to hear from Jetpack, drop a note. If you want to hear from both, neither, doesn't matter. We just want to make sure that this is the most relevant for you all. So if there was any interest about Wendy or Jetpack and whatever it is, drop it in. We'll share it out. And stay tuned. Not only did we have Wendy on today, we have that podcast that's going to be dropping sometime in the future. I don't know. I don't have the calendar in front of me. But I appreciate everybody's time today. We've also linked up to Wendy's website in the chat, so you could check it out there. If we didn't get to all of your questions, I know there were some folks that had some questions for Wendy. I encourage you to reach out, check out our website, connect with her on LinkedIn. And Wendy, thanks again for spending the time
Welcome.
today.
You're welcome. This was so fun.
All right, fantastic. Well, I'm going to go ahead and close the poll. It looks like we have a couple people to send your way, Wendy. We look about
Thank
9
you.
folks that kind of raised their hand. So we'll get that set up for you. And appreciate the time, and everybody enjoy the rest of your Wednesday.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Take care.